we are speaking with Amanda Filippo and Matt Schaubroeck. They are the co-founders of ioAirflow, a software company that helps identify energy efficiency and indoor environmental quality issues in commercial buildings. So they use wireless sensors and a proprietary AI diagnostics tool, which can identify ways for buildings to reduce their energy consumption and utility costs, while also increasing their overall comfort and building health. So think of it as a digital audit platform that provides hard data to help energy service companies create more green buildings. Amanda has a master's in environment and resource studies from the University of Waterloo, where she focused on progressive economics and barriers to commercial building energy efficiency, which sounds like quite the fit for this business that you started.
Yes.
And Matt has a master's in business administration from the University of Manitoba with a focus on entrepreneurship. Having this coverage from both sides of the business, they came together to form ioAirflow. And despite only recently monetizing the business, their accolades precede them, having already been a global finalist in the Falling Walls Scientific Research Forum, a competition that brought them to Berlin, as well as a global finalist at the ASD Cup, which is a prop tech pitch competition. And so many more things that we'll cover today too. But Matt and Amanda, for now, welcome to Start Podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Of course. So to start us off, tell us a bit about how ioAirflow came to be. How did you get it up and running?
Sure. So ioAirflow actually started a little bit earlier than when Amanda and I took this company into the new direction. We started in 2016, and there was a different co-founder at the time, and we were focused on something a little bit different in the building side. It was building automation, so just putting smart brains in dumb buildings. And we spent about 2 years toying with that idea, talking to a lot of people, and realized after about a year and a half that it just wasn't going to work. And after that, that co-founder decided to leave, and I was stuck with that question of, well, like, do I shut this down? We have some intellectual property. We have some things that we've done. We have some tests. We have some hardware. But should I just close it down and focus on my next idea, or is there something I can salvage from this wreckage? And I took about 6 months to learn about what I could do and learn the industry a little more. And I really wanted to do something in the energy efficiency side. And as it turns out, had met someone a few months prior at a green building energy networking event. And one time we decided to get together for coffee. And as they say, the rest is history.
That sounds about right. I would say so.
So Amanda and I, we met in, I guess, 2018 would be the first time we met, and stayed in touch a little bit. And well, you were working at a different initiative.
Yeah. So I was working at Manitoba Race to Reduce at the time, and it was a 4-year competition between commercial buildings in Manitoba to reduce their energy use by 10%. And so I was the program manager for this, and we through that project, I got to meet someone who was running the Canadian Green Building Council, and she had reached out to me to do a mentor program, speed mentor program at the King's Head, and I figured, talking about myself and having a beer, like that sounds really pleasant for me. So. And that's where I met Matt. And about, I would say, maybe 8 months later, I reached out to him. He introduced the business at this time, and we exchanged business cards. I reached out to him because we needed to fund our awards ceremony. So part of this program was every year we had an awards ceremony. And I needed sponsors for awards. And I thought, hey, maybe this guy wants a platform. It might be a nice fit. It's a startup focusing on commercial building energy efficiency, and I had 150 people in the industry that were going to be attending this event, so it seemed like a good mix.
Right.
So I sent him an email, really just wanting to get money out of him. Let's be realistic here. And we sat down at 4th.
Yeah. And the tides turned, and I said, sure, I'll give you your sponsorship dollars, but in return, you have to quit your day job and any job security and then come work at this thing that we've just in the process of relaunching. How about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And
right, and naturally you were like, this is a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. My whole life, I make very rash decisions without thinking them through. And I thought, why?
Lucky for you, Matt.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Why would I want to stay in a good paying job and, go work for a company that has no paying customers yet. And that is what I did.
Right. No paying customers and still a question mark over it, right? So how defined was the new business at that point?
Very early stage. And in fact, I mean, so speaking of rash decision making, that's how I make my lot in life. And I had this idea that I was pretty sure was going to work. And I had done some tests in buildings, and we had actually written some reports for some clients. And Amanda came in and took one look and said, all of this is garbage. Throw it out, start over. None of this is useful. So it's a bit of a wake-up call for me, but also extremely grateful that Amanda did take the plunge, because you don't know what you don't know. And as it turned out, in the efficiency market, I didn't know a whole heck of a lot.
But you were living in it nevertheless.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Well, and that's why your background's like, when you look at your bio, right, when we start this thing off, it really does seem like a perfect mix between the two. But, you know, finding a co-founder can be a really tricky art. Sounds like you guys have had some success together, but maybe, Matt, you had a first round with someone else on a similar iteration of the business. What's that like when a co-founder leaves the company?
Well, it's a messy divorce, and it's there's a lot of lawyers that get involved, and it's something that I think a lot of people take lightly. And when you have an idea, and when you start into a company, you have this idea that, you know what, we'll split everything 50-50, or one of us will have majority control. We'll just figure it out. If you don't actually figure it out, if you don't have a process in place, if that person leaves, or if you want to leave, it can become a world of pain. And I was fairly fortunate in my case. The co-founder just decided that this was not the life for him. And so we ended things very amicably and relatively quickly. But it could have sunk the entire company.
Right.
And I think now with Amanda coming on board, I had a different perspective coming in, and it was a little more cautious, and I took the time to make sure that things were done the right way.
Yeah. How did you know then that you could work with Amanda and trust each other? Like, you'd just been through this bad divorce, right? What did that look like at that point? Were you tentative?
You know what? It was, we connected right away at Fourth. And so I think the thing that gets the most underrated is, sure, hard skills and letters after name are all important, but it's got to be a culture fit, because you have to get together and spend way too much time, like an inappropriate amount of time together for far too long.
Late
and
nights,
if you don't like that
Oh, yeah.
person, it's going to go terribly.
Yeah.
Just on a personal level, if you don't like that person.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you definitely, there's a lot of aspects that you need to consider. But like Matt said, we hit it off right away. Our senses of humor were relatively twisted. We had a lot of good stories. We grew up in the same neighborhood. He went to school with my siblings. I went to school with his cousin. We've just had a lot of things to talk about outside of the business. And like Matt's saying, I mean, we spend more time with each other than we spend with our partners. We spend more time with each other than we spend with our families. I get more 2 a.m. texts and phone calls from this guy than I've ever gotten in my life. And realistically, like, if you don't have that that friendship and that connection, at least in our case, I would say that it wouldn't work. It's not to say that's always the case, but in this particular instance, I think Matt and I know what we need in a quote-unquote partner.
Right. And that's some good advice. So find someone that you have that natural rapport with, not just the skill difference. Are there any other tips that you would give for picking that co-founder, or for preparing in advance? Like, is a prenup something you need here, Matt? Like, to your point of lawyers being involved?
Well, I mean, a date before you marry, right? I mean, you don't necessarily have to jump into bed with someone right away just because they have the skill set you're looking for. You know, take some time, work with them. I think, Amanda, you quit your day job, but you didn't come on full time for the company for about 6 months after that point, because you wanted to make sure it was a good fit for you and make sure that we got along.
Yep.
And after that is when things really started to roll, and then the equity came after that point, and all the legal stuff came through. But the first hurdle really was to make sure that we could get along when we have 2 a.m. Text conversations. And I mean, the reality of a startup is sometimes you have yelling matches, and those aren't fun times.
No.
And if you don't have someone who can say, you know what, like, yesterday sucked and you were an asshole, but let's keep moving forward and make it happen, which happens to me a lot because I can be an asshole, then it will all fall apart if you don't have that in place.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that is an important dynamic. So Amanda, for you, when you're taking this plunge to leave a full-time job and really ultimately, like you're saying, go into something that has no paying customers yet, which means you've got to understand what that intake means for you financially at the same time too. What was your thought process at that time, or what is the gut feeling that made you take that leap?
The gut feeling or the thought process. Thought processes are not my forte. No, I'm just kidding. They have to be when you run a startup. I have always been a very ambitious person who jumps in with both feet and just sees what happens. I can go with the flow. So that was definitely a contributing factor. I actually wasn't that happy in the job that I had before. One thing is I'm extroverted. I'm very talkative. Anyone that knows me will say that I talk a lot, and other people are a really important part of my job and my work environment. I really like working with other people, and I was very isolated in that job. When I was hosting events and when I was, running meetings and stuff, that was one thing. But it's hard to develop kind of a like we were talking about earlier, almost a cultural rapport, a friendship when you're hosting events or when you're putting on or you're hosting meetings. There's a level of, I don't want to say professionalism because I would like to believe that I'm relatively professional at ioAirflow, but you're definitely always have a bit of a face on. When you're dealing with a specific industry and you're putting on specific events, but when it came to actually the everyday, I was working by myself, and so it was, for a lack of better words, it was lonely.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I wanted to try something new. I'd come from the nonprofit sector, and I had actually co-founded nonprofit organizations in the past, and I really liked that. I liked having a group of people to manage. I liked having people to work closely with. I liked having kind of a family, work environment. And so on that side of things, it was actually quite easy to make the decision. I knew right off the hop that I liked Matt. I thought he was great. He was articulate and intelligent and fun and had a great idea. Mm-hmm. And I had industry expertise that I thought that I could really lend to it. So in that sense, it was a very easy decision. Making the decision to leave the financial comfort, and I am a single home owning individual, so that was a little bit more difficult. And
absolutely.
I said, I'm going to give this, and I told Matt very bluntly right off the hop, like, I'm going to give this a couple of months, and if this doesn't go anywhere, then
I got to make some money.
I'm going to figure something else out.
Yeah.
And it ended up, well, I mean, so far it's worked out. So
right. Well, it's been a little ways now, so that's great. Now, we had, to pivot a little bit, we had Scott Russell on the show a little while ago, and you guys are familiar with him. He's another local startup called Solar Skyrise. And on the show, he helped explain prop tech and clean tech a little bit and explain the industry that you're both kind of like adjacent to and living in together. Now, what do those terms mean to you? Like, help us get back into the tech of your business or into the understanding of the industry that you guys are in.
Sure. So prop tech and clean tech for us really means green buildings. And green buildings is very much a growing industry around the world. And we're focused on what you call the retrofit market. So new buildings today, they're built with some pretty intensive building codes. There's a lot of efficiency that goes into them when you build from the ground up. Old buildings have none of that. They're dumb and inefficient, and you lose money and efficiency all over the place. And the retrofit market is something that hasn't really got a lot of attention up until very recently, and that's where we're coming in. So the idea is we want to look at existing buildings and say, hey, you're losing some efficiency over here. This is causing you to be sick. This is causing you to lose money. This is a problem for the long-term operational lifespan of your building. There's so many things that can affect a building negatively. We want to show them a path to get to sustainability a lot quicker.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And so who are your main clients that you're selling to? Because I think you could probably go a few different ways with that solution. Did you pick kind of one type of person to focus on, one user?
We did, and this is where this is one of our first big pivots when Amanda came on board, where I thought we would test directly in buildings. As it turns out, there's a whole industry called energy management companies or energy service companies. We'll call them ESCOs for short. That they go and do these tests right now. But the problem is, it's a manual process, takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money. So a lot of buildings just can't afford these tests. But they're still hemorrhaging, thousands or tens of thousands of dollars every month because they have all these inefficiency issues. So Amanda suggested that we pivot to work with those companies instead of being a B2C company, go towards a B2B market instead. And that's been really successful for us.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. And great job, Amanda, coming to the table with that.
Why, thank you.
With your industry expertise. Okay. So that's really interesting. Now, and Matt, I know that you're closely tied as well to the startup scene here in Manitoba. Did you know that this was an industry that the Canadian government was focused on supporting before you got into it? Like that whole world of clean tech and prop tech, there's all these competitions and there's grant funding and things like that. Or was it a passion that came first?
I heard the word prop tech for the first time about 9 months ago. So
Perfect.
no, I had no idea. I mean,
Right.
Amanda and I are both hippies, I think, which is one of the reasons we're drawn to each other. But we wanted to go out and try and save the world in whatever way we could. And, buildings are one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions in the world, and particularly in Canada. It's about 12% commercial buildings alone of all our greenhouse gas output.
35 in Winnipeg.
Yeah, it's
Well, what's the next highest?
Agriculture.
Yeah. Vehicles. There's lots of other things, but buildings is something that not a lot of people are looking at. So that's really why we both wanted to get into it. And everything else after that has kind of been just a happy surprise.
Right. So now that you find out those things do exist and there's different kind of grant funding you can access and things like that, let's talk a little bit about that. Off the top of your head, can you think of the one that was the most impactful for you guys?
I'm going to save two. Sorry.
Sure, that's great. Yeah.
So the first is NRC IRAP, which has been with us for about 2-3 years. Is allow us to hire some youth positions and now into a full project, which is advancing us by leaps and bounds. And the second is MyTax, and we're on our second MyTax grant now. The first one, we were the first second application, I should say, for a college in Canada, working with Red River College, and now we're working with the University of Manitoba on a data analytics report. Mm-hmm. Both of those things, again, thinking of skill set matching, we don't have the expertise, and we couldn't necessarily afford to bring someone else in-house, even at a co-founder level, to do all of that work for us or to take that on their own. So having those grants out there to hire the expertise and bring it on board has been just completely valuable.
Mm-hmm. I think that's definitely something that a lot of people don't consider. Matt is very ambitious. He has a lot of business knowledge. I have a lot of industry knowledge, and we had a great idea. Turning an idea into a business are two completely different stories. And even with the knowledge and the expertise that we had and the ambition that we had, we realized very, very early on, even when I was looking at those original reports that Matt was drafting, I know this is garbage. I don't know exactly how to fix it, though.
Right.
And especially, we're in software, we're in building energy efficiency. Neither of us have engineering backgrounds. Neither of us have computer science backgrounds. We know that this can be done, but we just don't know how to do it. And those two grants definitely came a long way, because we realized a little while ago that we were going to have to step up our game in terms of the expertise, for sure. Mm-hmm.
What about the accelerator side of things? So you guys have been a part of a few. In fact, there's some that you're still participating in, and some of them aren't even in town. So how does that work for you guys, and how do you leverage that?
Well, one of the bonuses of COVID, I guess, is that we can apply via Zoom to a lot more digital accelerators, which has been nice. So there's some clean tech accelerators that are focused particularly in North America. I think Foresight CAC is one. They're based out of Vancouver, so we've now part of their cohort, and they're helping bring clean tech pre-revenue companies to market. And Mars, of course, in Toronto, they have a lot of assets and value that they bring to the table. And you're right. I mean, it's accelerator application season. It feels like right now, where everyone's doing intakes for the next cohort. And with COVID, it's been a really interesting process, because normally I think I'd probably be flying all over the continent right now to go and make those applications and pitches. And right now it's just, setting up all these Zoom meetings.
Which is great for small businesses in a way, because it saves you a lot of money, right? Like, that's unrealistic for some people to be able to fly around the country, but you want that mentorship and expertise. So it's this kind of tough decision you have to make.
Very silver lining, but yes.
Right. Yeah. What are the typical expectations of you and time commitments? Like, for example, say for the one that you're already participating in.
Digital is a little less intensive. I think we have about 16 hours of hard mentorship every month. And then Amanda and I, we always have a lot of takeaways that come with it. So with those takeaways, we're probably putting in another 20 to 30 hours a month per accelerator. And some will go more, some will go less. It really depends. I think that every accelerator is different, and you want to take a look and make sure that it's something that can fit in your time commitment, and that it's going to focus on the right things. A lot of accelerators will, even in their application, you can take a look and say, I don't really need help with this. Maybe you're a marketing focus, or maybe,
right.
You're focused on business models that is not where I want to be. And so that kind of lets you whittle it down, because it is a two-sided interview at the end of the day, right? If they want to bring you in, you have to make sure that you want to work with them.
Yeah, and that you're going to put in the work when you get there.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, nobody wins in the end.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that it is equally as impactful virtually as it is in person? So even though you have access to more accelerators now, but do you think that the virtual accelerator is equally as impactful as experiencing it in person?
I think that maybe in the beginning I was a little bit thrown off, like with the Mars courses and having to do everything digitally, especially again because I'm a people person and I like to have office space and I like to be interacting with people. But what I did find really interesting is that we started working from home in March, end of March. And we had to really switch everything online, working with the accelerators, working with consultants, working with staff, taking courses, everything switched over to online relatively quickly. And at first it was overwhelming, and now it's just the way it is. It's second nature. So I'm finding it, I don't know. Do you feel any differently?
Well, I think that people are getting better at banter online.
Yes.
Not just you and me, but it feels more like a natural...
But definitely you too, yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like a natural conversation again, which I think was in March and April not necessarily the case. I think people were still trying to find out how to unmute themselves on their screen, and now it's quite a bit different.
Right. Half the time you were just spent, navigating someone's technical difficulties, whereas now you can just get right into the chit chat and then go into the conversation, much like you would if you were meeting in person.
Yes. Like for me, the biggest challenge was I live in a zoo, so I have a lot of pets.
Literally?
Like pretty, not quite, but it's close. I don't want to use literally when it's not actually literal, but it's pretty bloody close to
You
a zoo.
literally live in a zoo.
Okay, I live in a zoo, and it's very, very noisy. And
right,
there's
that would be hard.
Yeah, there's definitely when you're dealing with professional business meetings and having to explain to people beforehand. If you hear someone screaming in the background, it's just my parrot, or if you hear barking and like that, I've really hammered down the talent of muting constantly. Mm-hmm. Like my finger is constantly on the mute button.
Yeah.
I'm ready. So yeah.
I have different backgrounds depending on how serious the meeting is. Yeah. Sometimes you're looking into my library. Sometimes it's just my closet. It just depends how much I care.
Perfect. Great. So then I know how much you care about me based on which background you put. Great tip for Matt. Okay, well, we are going to now get into our speed round. So answer these questions with just a couple words or a sentence. And if there's good stories, we'll get to them after.
All right.
Okay. Describe yourself in a word or two.
Obnoxious.
What's the word? Perseverance?
Sure.
Yeah, but I feel that's not a
someone who perseveres. We'll allow it.
Yeah. Okay.
Describe your business in a word or two.
Making buildings smarter and healthier.
That's not a word or two.
You're going to win after all, Amanda.
Building efficient building. Oh man, I screwed that up. We have a tagline. We're in the process of creating our 2 to 3 word tagline.
Get in there.
What is it? Achieving healthier buildings.
Yes. Okay. What is the hardest part of starting a business?
HR.
Management.
What do you suck at?
Delegating.
Organizational skills.
At any point, have you ever truly considered giving up on entrepreneurial life?
Last week.
Actually, no.
Hey,
wow.
You found the right partner.
Wow,
okay.
Not once have I thought about leaving this godforsaken company.
Give it time.
Yeah.
Wow.
What keeps you up at night?
Cash flow.
My biological clock. Sorry. I'm sorry.
I love it. What is the best way for you to relax?
Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist monk, and I listen to a lot of his Plum Village podcasts and YouTube videos.
Nice.
Box cello suites.
Pardon me?
Yeah, he's a nerd.
I played cello.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. What is the best advice you've ever received?
If you're going to smoke something, make sure it's not cigarettes. Thank you, Dad.
Don't jump unless there's a boat.
Okay. You guys have wild advice. What is the toughest thing you've ever done?
So my undergrad's in French Lit, and I had to once translate 3 pages of James Joyce's Ulysses. It was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Does not sound fun.
Probably moving to Kenya for a job with the UN when I had never been overseas and I had never traveled alone.
But that's because you put the critical thinking into it and you didn't just use your gut, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I got that job and I applied for the job on spur of the moment, got the job spur of the moment, and within 3 weeks I was on a plane.
Matt, you found the right partner to ask to jump ship and join your business. What does innovation mean to you?
Thinking of things in a way that no one else does.
Progression, moving forward, change.
That's our speed round, you guys. Bravo. You did it. They're high-fiving. That's what that sound was. For those only listening to audio.
Okay, next time fist bump.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I love the question in our speed round about like how to relax and starting, and whether you thought about giving up your business and all these things that I think like entrepreneurs have a really hard time doing. Let's talk about staying sane and finding balance when you have a business. What's the process of finding balance like for you guys?
So for me, it's hard, actually. I have a hard time managing. I will work 18 hours a day if I am allowed to unchecked. So I have to force myself to stop.
Right.
And so the biggest part of that for me is getting away from electronics in all shapes and forms. So that's why one of the reasons I played cello is because then I have to just focus on the music. It's just sheet music. I can't look at my phone. I can't be thinking of work. And it kind of gives you that headspace to think, like use your brain in a bit of a different way. And just taking the time. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this idea, this really unhealthy, horrible idea that you always have to be hustling. And I think to a large part that's true, but you also need breaks, because if you aren't sleeping and if you are always on the go, you're going to burn out. So I actually came back. I took an extra day or two went up to the cabin, went up to Hecla, cooked everything on an open flame and read 2 books. And I didn't look at my phone more than 3 times. It was fabulous.
Yeah, the not looking at your phone is huge.
Yeah. And now I'm back and feel totally recharged. And those 3 days, I think, will give me more productivity for the next 2 months than anything else I could have done.
Right. It kind of comes back to that idea too of how people always say, I had the best idea in the shower. And it's like, it's not just this weird trend that people have ideas in the shower. It's because their phone is not there. They're more relaxed. They're just taking time to actually think of whatever they want to think about. And that's when the idea sparks, right? So that speaks to that same anecdote of saying you need that time away as well, right?
Yeah. Have a bath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, baths are nice. Yeah, I think Matt and I can be, well, I'm going to speak on his behalf. Matt and I can be very high-strung people, for sure. And I have very bad anxiety, and I have had very bad anxiety since I was a kid. And I'm medicated for it, and I have had a lot of psychiatric assistance to help me deal with my anxiety. So I think that over the years I've learned a lot of coping mechanisms. For that's how I got started listening to the Buddhist mindfulness videos, and I think I still struggle with that. We actually just had a conversation earlier today where Matt's like, "Hey, when you get a task, you just have to do it." And for me, I sit there and I overthink everything, and I make it more complicated than it needs to be. And then before I realize, what's going on in my mind, 3 hours have passed by and I have not done anything. And I think realistically, like procrastination and stressing out and being a perfectionist is something that a lot of people deal with.
Oh,
now.
yeah, so many.
And we have a habit nowadays to escape into electronics.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier for me to just play a word game or play a game of solitaire to calm down. But realistically, that's not calming me down. That is procrastination because I'm still staring at a computer. I'm still thinking about what I need to do.
And you're more stressed out afterwards because you still haven't achieved the thing that you, in the back of your mind, you know you're supposed to be achieving.
Absolutely. And it's very, very overwhelming. And when you're running your own business, it's even more so because there's a whole team that's relying on me now. Mm-hmm. And, there's a business that, it's make or break. And so I think that I still have not mastered the art of relaxing and, but it's something that I'm working on, and having a good team helps. Having a team that understands that you're a high-strung person helps. I would have to 100% agree with Matt. Giving yourself a little bit of extra time and unplugging, staying on, watching TV, watching YouTube videos, playing a game on your computer, going on Facebook on your phone. That's not what disconnecting is.
Right, it's all still technology.
It's all still technology. Getting out into nature, doing some breathing exercises. I mean, easier said than done. It took me a lot of practice to be able to do those things, but I would say that those are really, really crucial, especially for us, because a big component of us running this business is we want our employees to feel that their personal lives are valued, and that their work-life balance is very, very, it's as important to us as it is to them.
Right.
This is just one part of your life. Your business is not your life.
And there is so much proof to say that an employee who does have that balance, or at least a semblance of it, they have time for themselves and they are able to disconnect, are actually going to have higher productivity for you.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and that's proven. And actually, interestingly enough, the episode just before yours, we had Educalm on the podcast, and
that's Josiane.
Yes.
Josiane I was really, really good friends with. French community.
I know, French community.
Yeah.
So, and they have, of course, mindfulness product for teachers and platform. And so on the episode, we actually did a little exercise of taking a minute to breathe and to reconnect kind of and take that moment away. And so, there's some good tips there in that episode for it. But how about the essence of being able to tell somebody about your need for support around anxiety sometimes, or around needing to calm down? Like, is that a choice that you made to tell Matt, and you're talking about it here today, or have you always just been someone who's more open? Because I think that's something some people would struggle with. Like, they wouldn't actually want to tell their business partner or their colleagues about it.
I would say, a big part of it is because, again, Matt and I, that work-life balance is so important to us, and I don't want our employees to ever feel like it's something that they need to hide. If they have a problem or they're not in a good headspace, or they need some extra time off, I don't want them to ever feel like they can't say that to me. So part of it is setting an example. Part of it is like I said, I've been in a lot of therapy over the last years, so over the last several years. So I'm actually, it's something that I've learned to be very comfortable discussing. But also, I'm not going to lie, I think that my anxiety and mental health issues make for really good stories, especially when I'm doing a podcast. So
right, perfect. Yeah. So you just keep them coming.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Well, okay, speaking of a time to be anxious in, we are living in the era of COVID right now. And you guys had a great statement in advance of today saying that COVID has a way of bringing out creativity, but also of making things crazy unpredictable. And talk about this a little bit.
Well, this path to market, there's no straight line. If it was, it'd be so much easier. And for us, we were actually ready to go in March to test buildings. And we had hired an engineer, and we were set. And we were actively starting to scout our first customers. And then, of course, the world ended. And we then couldn't go into buildings for quite some time. And by the time we were ready to go back into buildings, when it was allowed to go back into buildings in early May, our engineer had left because it wasn't the job that they had wanted to do, because they were coming on to test buildings and kind of just sat there working with spreadsheets for a few months. And what do you do at that point? Because then we could have gone back into market, but now we didn't have the skill set to get those tests done. So it was just a kind of horrendous few months that, if it wasn't for COVID, you can't plan for that. You can't plan for any of that. So being agile, and that day in particular, I remember when an engineer left, I had I'm not an angry person. That was not a good day.
And I am an angry person, and so that was definitely not a good day. No, we really struggled. We really, really struggled. And also because one of the things is we were trying to be creative, right? So we were trying to think, okay, we are a startup. We need to get into buildings. We are in the middle of a pandemic where nobody's in their office. What are some of the innovative ways that we can perhaps go in and do our testing and put people at ease? So we decided to team up with a local biohazard company, who so happens to be my dad's company. And so my brother is a microbiologist, and they do biohazard cleanup, and most notably my brother does COVID-19 cleanup. So if there's a contamination or whatever, that's what he does for a living. And so I called my brother and said, okay, we gotta figure this out. So we said, why don't we in addition to doing, these energy efficiency and these thermal comfort tests, why don't we also offer, for my brother to go in and do a walk around, and, you get a percentage of what we make. And, your job is basically going to be to show people safe ways of getting their staff back into buildings and making sure that office space is ready to go, and what the healthiest ways for keeping things disinfected are.
Right.
So it seemed like a win-win for both our company, and
it was a pivot for you guys at the time that allowed you to kind of keep moving forward.
Exactly. And so we went and we published our ads, and we put it on the website, and we put it on social media, and my brother went and advertised it on their behalf, and we got an email with a customer asking us about the services on the same day that
it all went down. And so we had to email our first potential paying customer and say, sorry, I know we just advertised the service last week, but we can't do it anymore. And it's awkward. It's kind of embarrassing. It makes you look amateurish. At least, and I think it made us look kind of amateurish, and you're going to get those. But you pick yourself up and... Yeah, but on the pivot side, on the data side, that it was really interesting on the creativity, because in a typical building, we have about 100,000 data points that we collect, and within that, you can look for so many different things. And what we look for, right, is efficiency and health and air quality and things like that. No one ever thought to do, data pandemic testing. And of course, there's not everything we can test, but there's a surprising amount that you can do. And so it was just looking into the research and seeing, okay, so what affects the spread of coronavirus in a built environment? What can we measure? How do we measure it? Is this something that we can get an analysis together on the fly? So that was a really interesting couple of weeks in trying to figure out a whole new business model. And then with the assets of Amanda's brother's company, it kind of really all came together in a hurry.
Yeah. Pretty impressive that you guys took the situation that you were in, tried to, you pivot it, such a common word these days, but move it into something that could keep you kind of on your toes and give you guys something to do in this odd time, and allow you to still get your name out there, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you want to keep doing. So that's great. Now, I would want to ask you normally what you'd want to do differently if you could start again, but COVID really was a way to start again, right? So maybe speak more to what that meant for the team dynamic. So you had someone on your team, one obvious one that you mentioned, who there just really wasn't that right fit anymore because they were kind of sitting on their hands rather than doing the job they thought they'd be doing, which was totally the nature of COVID. But you've got different students and different research programs you guys are working with and things like that. So people-wise, what other changes happened with COVID?
Well, it was changing expectations, I think, was the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. So at the time COVID hit, we were at Ace Project Space at Red River, and their term was just wrapping up at the end of April. So they had their fixed project. It was a heavy UX UI component that they couldn't complete, but they still had enough work to do to build out a prototype, and that was fabulous.
These are the students that you were working with through the program.
Right, yeah. Right, at Ace. But we also had some environmental studies students that had been working with us since January, and then we hired two of them to work as co-op students over the summer. And their job was supposed to be going into buildings and doing testing. And it became difficult. They're scientists, and they were going to come in and do detective work in buildings. And they now weren't able to do that until early June.
2 weeks ago. Yeah. 2 weeks ago, end of July, really. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was difficult, and we could tell. as much as you can tell when you're over, when you're working with everything online, we knew this wasn't the job that they had signed up for. It was, and we had to, in parts of it was make work projects. Okay, well, we can't go into the building, so we have to continue on with the research. These are students, and I can remember myself being an undergrad student, and, you know, when I get a job in the summer, I don't want to be sitting doing more research, because that's all I've been doing for the last 8 months. And so there was, you know, I think there was definitely some struggles there with having to find that job satisfaction for them and find what they were good at when the job itself wasn't what they had expected. I think that we all understood the situation, Matt and myself included. It wasn't what we had hoped for. It was definitely a big struggle. We are a great team. We've got a good dynamic, and we understood that, but that doesn't make it fun or satisfying or enjoyable in any way. It was still a struggle.
Yeah, and people management and those changes has been so hard for so many companies at this point in time, right?
Yeah. I think the fact Matt and I are relatively flexible people, high-strung at times, but flexible, and, you know, we are the kind of people that can go with the flow, and we have fun. I think that went a very, very long way.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that we are a startup, and things when you're in a startup are unpredictable. You are learning every day about what it is to be an entrepreneur, what it is to run a business, what it is to have staff, what it is to manage your staff, what it is to manage your own expectations. That when you're in this constant state of, well, turmoil, I would like to say, running a business is turmoil. It makes it a little bit easier to adjust to outside factors.
Mm-hmm. And these students were meant to be doing testing, right, for you and going into different buildings. Talk to me a little bit about Winnipeg as a test market in general. So a lot of new products and services say, you know, it's a good place to test your stuff in Winnipeg. Obviously, COVID aside, has that been true for you guys? Is there a certain acceptance here that makes it a good test market in the realm that you guys are working in?
I would say so in a lot of ways. It's definitely a great testing market. We've had many people, and I've heard this over the years on many occasions, if you can sell something in Winnipeg, you can sell it anywhere.
Right, that's the saying.
Yeah, that's just the saying. But what has made it really interesting for me is that Winnipeg is such a connected community. I've worked in this industry, and so it was not difficult for me to pick up the phone and tap into some previous connections and say, hey, I've you know, jumped ship and doing this, and hey, do you want to give this a shot?
To pilot it.
Yeah, to pilot it. And hey, yeah, for sure, we'd love to. Those relationships go a long way. And I've lived in Toronto, and I've lived in Nairobi, and those big cities, just you don't have that same type of community feel. Yeah. It's a lot harder, I find, to tap into those connections.
Well, and Matt, for you've worked also at North Forge, which is a startup agency here in the city, so you understand that kind of prairie startup ecosystem. What has that meant for you in your journey personally?
Well, I mean, it's been huge. People here are willing to help, and Winnipeg's a market unlike, I think, probably any other major city. Even just, we were talking with a potential partner last week, and he said, you know, I think I know your dad. Did you grow up on X Street? And I was like, sure enough, yes. I mean, we were neighbors, as it turns out. And like that sort of thing, I don't think, I think we take it for granted here in Winnipeg, but really as a connection market, it goes a long way. And there may not be a lot of investor capital here in Winnipeg, and there may not be as established an industry as there are in Silicon Valley or Toronto. But what there is that village, you know, and everyone always says it takes a village to grow a startup, but that village is here, and it is so enthusiastic. And what we perhaps, you know, lack in available capital, we make up for in this enthusiasm to want and to crave that success.
Mm-hmm. That's a great sentence right there.
I was gonna say, like, I'm really impressed with how that came out.
Did you rehearse that? Yeah. Now, I also happen to know that the two of you are very involved in the community in various ways and always have been. Tell us a little bit about that and maybe how it's contributed to your entrepreneurial life at this point.
Well, for me, I mean, like I said, although this is the first, you know, startup I've you know, been involved in, the first business that I've started, I'm no stranger to starting projects. So I grew Bicycle Valet Winnipeg, which is a project of Bike Winnipeg. and I ran that for 4 years. And Bridging the Gap, which is an inner city gardening and Indigenous education program, I ran that for 3 years, and actually my sister took over the program. So I built that up, and I co-founded a music festival in Kitchener-Waterloo. So when I was living out there, that's really the kind of stuff that I enjoy doing, working nonprofit and working with nature and volunteering. So I volunteer for Rainbow Trout every year.
Yep.
And
does that stuff tie into your work life, or are you able to really keep it separate and you enjoy it for a different reason?
It's a bit of both, I think. Again, a big part of running a business with Matt is tapping into those community connections, and I have a lot of them. So I would say in that sense, it's not really all that separate, but it is something that I enjoy and that I tend to do on my off times.
Sure.
So,
yeah. And Matt, how about you?
Well, so I've been working in the startup space for about 6 years now, and in different capacities. And some was on some projects that didn't get very far, and some was helping other companies. And that's been really interesting to get some ideas on how to start things and what to do and what not to do, and you kind of get some glimpses from other companies on things that might work for you and things that don't. But the community here, I've been involved for a long time in the community, mostly in politics actually, because I got into politics because I wanted to make a difference, and I think realized that the way to make a difference for me was not in politics. That there are some changes you can make, but the kind of change that I wanted to make to have that direct positive influence just wasn't there. So looking for that new space and finding it in the startup community was really interesting. I mean, I don't come from a business family. My dad thinks that this whole thing is just preposterous and can't understand how.
And that you're going to come to your senses, or what?
He's still confused as to why I don't have a pension yet. But
right.
But it's this community. It just sucks you right in. And I had never really considered entrepreneurship until about 6 years ago now. And now I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah. And I'm sure we could get into a whole other conversation about that when it comes to teaching entrepreneurship in schools with youth and things like that. And I know you give back doing some presentations and stuff to youth too. So it does come full circle when you've learned from that path, or lack of path, I suppose, when it comes to entrepreneurship. So what is next, you guys, for ioAirflow and for the two of you?
Well, we're right now in a pretty active beta. We have some customers that we're working with directly, but the plan is to launch in January. And launch for us means Canada and the US, and growing very, very quick. So being a SaaS product, we're already lining up potential customers in our markets. And there's some key markets that we're looking at, like California and New York and a couple places in Canada. Essentially, wherever people pay too much in utility bills, we're in there like a dirty
Wherever
shirt.
the big buildings, yeah, exactly.
And so from there, the plan is to go global. So we're scaling quick, and part of what we're looking at with these accelerator applications now is what geographic market do we want to hit next?
Right, and who can help you scale and do that?
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. We'd love to have our guests also share some resources on the show. So what are you reading? What are you streaming? What's a good resource if they're interested in just general growth and learning, or maybe something specific to your industry?
So I'm reading a great book, and the authors, I forget the name, but Machine Platform Crowd, and it's the idea on how AI and crowdsourcing and now I'm forgetting what the third one is, so that's clearly getting retained well. But how it's changing industries, and how we can't just rely on old business models anymore. And I think that's a hard thing for established industries like the ones we're working in to accept, that there is a new way of doing business. And what we have to do as startups is find a way to bridge the gap and bring this new way of doing business to this group that has been doing things the same way for 50, 60, 70 years. And so the more resources you can pick up on things like that, I think will go a long way to be that guide for them.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun one. Anything else? Any other resources? You mentioned a good podcast earlier for mindfulness. Anything just on a personal level even that has helped you?
Oh man, I see right now all the reading that I'm doing is very not business related. It's I really like dystopian novels, and so that's really what I'm focusing on right now.
Sure. It's summer, you got time.
Yeah,
That's great.
exactly.
We all need the personal stuff too, right?
I just finished a great book yesterday called Us Conductors. It's by a Giller Award-winning novelist. I read a lot of fiction. That's one of my ways of deplugging too. And it was all about the inventor of the theremin. And it was like very fictionalized, but and I don't know if this is real. I have to look into it still, but he was like a Soviet spy and he was in the US selling his theremin, but then actually selling secrets back to the state and then ended up in a Soviet gulag. It was, also refreshing and light.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Great. Okay, you guys, this has been fun, but tell us, what is the best way to learn more about ioAirflow and get in contact with you guys if someone's interested in learning more?
We are actually in the process of revamping our website right now. So although you can visit our website, which is ioAirflow.com, I wouldn't actually say that that's the best resource at this particular time. I'm always happy to receive emails and answer any questions. So I can be reached at amanda@ioAirflow.com.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
Matt with 2 T's at ioAirflow.com. And we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, and we're pretty easy to find on the net. If you Google us, you'll know where to find us.
Yeah, and it's literally the letters I, the letter O, and then Airflow. So you guys will be able to find it.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very
so
much.
Thanks for watching. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment below. Also, find us at startpodcast.ca for full show notes and to really get to know all of our guests and join our email list so you never miss an episode. You can also chat with us on social media at Start Podcast or find me at Margaux Miller. For now, thanks for watching.